Hi there, it's Florence here, and today is going to be a special episode, or rather the first of a few special episodes. Last year, at the end of the year, on my old YouTube channel, I filmed a video where I showed everything that I'd knitted that year, and you guys seemed to really enjoy it, or my maybe slightly different audience on that channel seemed to enjoy it, and it did quite well. So I figured I'd do the same thing this year, just do a video where I go through everything that I've knitted. Then I sat down and I made a list of everything that I knitted this year. And it turns out I made rather more than I thought. So this is going to be a multi-parter. Today is going to be the first part. I was thinking about how best to organise the video because there are a couple of options. I think last year I sorted everything into categories. So I did all of my jumpers, all of my summer tops and so on. Because this one is going to be split into multiple parts, I don't want to do that because I want every video to have an interesting mixture of stuff rather than just having a video that's all socks. And so I'm going to go over things in roughly chronological order. It's not quite correct. There are a couple of projects that are missing. There's one today that I just couldn't find, but is in my house somewhere, so I guess it'll probably show up in a later part. Things like that, but for the most part this is roughly chronological order. The other point is that I did not take the time to sort of neaten up any of these jumpers or other pieces of knitwear before the video. If they are pilling or fluffy or whatever, I wanted to show them to you in that state so that you can see what they actually look like after the wear they've had. So I'm sorry if they don't necessarily look perfect, but I figured it might be more useful to show them looking like this. Okay, so before I start, I will mention what I'm wearing as usual, especially because I'm very excited about this. This is my self-drafted wrap cardigan. I spoke about it on a podcast episode a few months ago, and I think by the time this video goes up, the pattern for this cardigan will be released because I'm really close to releasing it right now. So if you're interested in knitting one yourself, the pattern is available on my Ravelry, which will be linked in the description. This one is knitted in Knitting for Olive merino and soft silk mohair, which is one of my all-time favourite yarn combinations. It's lovely. It gives roughly a DK weight combined thread, and this is knitted on 4mm needles for the stockinette. Has a double knitted button band. It's really cute. I wear it a lot, and I hope you enjoy it. With that, I should probably jump straight into showing the pieces that I knitted, since I do have rather a few to get through. And the first piece, I think I actually showed in the Everything I Knitted in 2021 as a work in progress. So this was cast on in 2021 and then finished in 2022. This is the sweater number 18, I believe, by My Favourite Things Knitwear. I knitted it pretty much exactly when it released, I think, very late last year, and this is one of my all-time most worn pieces of knitwear. This was a huge de-stash of some yarn that I wasn't hugely excited about. So it's knitted up in one strand of Drops Nepal and one strand of Drops Kid Silk. So both of these are very affordable yarn choices, but they're not necessarily the most ethical. The colour range isn't my favourite. You know, there are a few reasons why I wouldn't necessarily want to work with Drops yarn all that much. But since I have it, you know, the most ethical and environmental yarn to use is what you've already got, and so I figured I should make something nice. Now, the yarn that is recommended for this pattern, I believe is, I think there are a couple of options. There's a Danish yarn, I still can't pronounce the brand or the yarn. I'll put the name here. And the other alternative is the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino, both held with a strand of silk mohair. So that's a sort of worsted weight, 18 stitch gauge, 19 stitch gauge main strand held with mohair. Now here's the thing, Drops Nepal is more like a 16 stitch gauge on its own. It's definitely a thicker Aran weight yarn, not really worsted weight, plus I was holding it with mohair. So this thing is definitely bigger than it was supposed to be. If I remember correctly, I knitted the size small, so it's actually a size up for me, I think, anyway, plus it's knitted at a much larger gauge than it's supposed to be. So overall it just came out very oversized, which is not something I'm upset about at all. This jumper is actually one of the softest ones I own. I do find Drops Kid Silk to be quite scratchy, definitely significantly more scratchy than the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair or other soft silk mohairs that I've tried, but this white colour I think must be softer than the others, or maybe it's just softened up a lot with wear, because this is really like not at all irritating to me. I wouldn't normally want to wear drops kid silk against my neck necessarily, but this never gives me issues. And so because it is made of cheaper yarn, and it is so oversized and cozy, this really was my throw it on over anything jumper all winter. You know, when you're like wearing your pajamas and you just want to put a jumper on over the top to go around the house, that's what this is for. I barely ever wear it out at all because it just is kind of difficult to style because of its oversizedness and chunkiness, but it probably has more hours of wear than most things that I'm going to be able to show you guys in these 2022 knitting summary episodes. Okay, I'll just speak a little bit about the pattern. The pattern by My Favourite Things Knitwear is, I believe, not size inclusive, so if that is something that will make you want to avoid it, then there is that information. I don't knit very much stuff by My Favourite Things Knitwear now, but I did knit more in the past. I believe she's taking some action to extend her size range, but so far it's been a little bit disappointing. Anyway, this is a very popular pattern, so I'm sure you've seen it. It has a drop shoulder construction. This sort of increased line along the shoulder is very typical of patterns by My Favourite Things Knitwear, and it always looks really lovely. And then it has this lovely ribbed texture which is only made up of knit and purl stitches. So it's very easy to make. I think a beginner could manage to knit this up without any issues. I would say that it's worn fairly well. Obviously when you're holding mohair with another strand, that's going to make that other strand pill less, but it does have quite a few sort of fluffies on it. Like if I was going to wear this out, I would probably want to remove just these little mohair fluffies underneath the arms and maybe try and brush this mohair and fluff it up a little bit again because it's flattened out a bit. But yeah, given the number of hours of wear this jumper has had, I think it's held up very well. And if you are looking for budget-friendly yarn, this is a pretty high-quality option. Excitingly, this is something that I don't think I've ever showed on this channel before, and I don't think I've showed very much on Instagram either. Like, I don't think I've even photographed it properly, probably because I never wear it for a couple of reasons. So I believe this is called Another Open Back Top by Another Knit. I knitted this up as a test knit near the start of the year, so before this pattern was released. And this jumper is a little bit of a statement one, because if you turn it around so you can see the back, it's completely open, and then it has this big tie at the bottom, which is made out of double knitted strips. This was an absolute beast to work on. It is knitted on 3mm needles, or I believe maybe the pattern calls for 3.5mm needles, but the designer is a very, very tight knitter, so I definitely had to go down to 3mm needles, and I was by no means the only person who had to do that. It also has these like quite wide balloon sleeves, again all on 3mm needles, plus the whole body is ribbed on 3mm needles, and then each of these double knitted ties is really quite long. I remember finishing the body of the jumper and thinking I was almost done, but these ties took me so long to knit. The other reason it took me an especially long time is because the wording in the pattern, because at the time it wasn't yet released, confused me a little bit, and it said to knit the body until it measured like X centimetres, and I knitted it until it measured that from underneath the arm, when actually you were supposed to knit it till it measured that from the collar. I know you're probably thinking, how did you make that mistake? It should have been really obvious that the top was far too long, but because it was all ribbed and quite narrow, I figured it would shorten quite a lot when it was stretched out around the body, so I don't know, it felt like it should be quite long. Anyway, I ended up ripping back all of the extra that I'd knitted, which was quite a lot. I don't know, 15 centimetres of ribbed body of a jumper on 3mm needles. And when I did rip it back, I ripped it back to just barely the length the pattern told you to knit it, and the pattern was already really quite on the crop side. And then because I picked up stitches at the bottom of the back in order to add the double knitted ties, I can't now go back and add extra length to the body. Actually, I mean, I could. Like, what I would have to do, I suppose, is I'd have to cut across the body. If I cut just above the tie here, I guess, I could pick up stitches and add some extra length and then graft the two pieces back together again with Kitchener stitch. Maybe I'll do that at some point, and it might be interesting to do a video on sweater surgery. Anyway, those complaints aside, which are nothing to do with the pattern or the designer and just to do with me making mistakes, it is a really nice and quite unique design, I think. It really reminds me of this one jumper from Reformation that I always wanted, and this is a really close dupe to it. The yarn that I used is from Mart. so it's always a little bit mysterious, but I think this is an angora merino blend, maybe? It's actually incredibly soft. It's not scratchy or tickly at all, even with the high neck, and it has a little bit of a hairy texture to it. I don't know if you can see that at all, probably not, but it's a tiny bit hairy. Overall, it's a pattern that I recommend if it's a style that interests you. It was easy enough to follow, other than the incident with the body length. And while I never wear this, both because one, is slightly too cropped, and two, it's just a hassle when it comes to like choosing a bra setup to work with a jumper like this, I do think it's really beautiful and I should probably wear it more. Having to pull it out to show it in this video has made me kind of decide I want to wear it maybe over the Christmas period, because that's a good time to wear a dramatic backless jumper, isn't it? This video is going to be a pretty interesting combination of pieces that I have showed in videos quite recently. I did a video of some of my favourite jumpers just a few weeks ago, and some of those are here. And also pieces which I've never showed on this channel and also pretty much never photographed on Instagram. So we have all kinds of stuff here, but this is definitely part of the category jumpers that I've showed quite recently on this channel. And it's well deserved because it is still one of my all-time favourites. This is ゚everything by Surrey Nordland. I knitted this in sort of late winter, early spring, I think. I remember being in a lecture theatre in probably late January, early February, and just being incredibly cold because of COVID, so all the doors to the lecture theatre had to be open the whole time, and the whole lecture theatre was as cold as being outside, basically. And I was sitting there in my jumper, my coat, and I was still freezing, and so I decided that I wanted to knit a pretty chunky colourwork jumper with that double thickness colourwork yoke to be my lecture jumper. And so in the gap between two of my lectures, I ordered a bunch of Knitting for Olive heavy merino, which is maybe my all-time favourite yarn, quite possibly. It's lovely. And this is what I ended up knitting with it. I believe the name, I think Surrey Nordland is a Finnish designer, but I believe it's to do with water lilies, which I think is really cute. And this colourwork motif is really pretty. I like it a lot. It also has colourwork at the end of the sleeves. And this is one of the fastest jumpers I've ever knitted, or at least for this sort of gauge, it's the fastest jumper I've ever knitted. I mean, if it's on 7mm needles, I can knit it up faster, but I knitted this whole thing up in under a week, including both sleeves in one day. And that's despite me ripping out the whole yoke one time because I didn't like how it looked, because I've been trying to knit it with two-handed colourwork. I'm not the fastest colourwork knitter. I am an English knitter. I don't like knitting continental, and I don't like knitting two-handed colourwork either. So when I knit colourwork, I properly like do a stitch and then drop the yarn and pick up the other colour and then make the next stitch. So it does take me quite a while, especially rounds where the colours are sort of alternating. And yet I still absolutely sped through this. I remember the pattern being a little bit unclear in some places, just with the yoke increases, but I do think it's perfectly suitable as a first ever colourwork project for somebody. It's really quite straightforward. I didn't do any of the short rows because I was a little bit worried about running out of yarn. I ended up having the right amount, so it wasn't the end of the world, but you can see I've just sort of blocked the back of the neck higher, and I'm always surprised when I pick it up how good it looks. In terms of how this yarn has held up, like I said, I'm a huge fan of the heavy merino. It has pilled a little tiny bit. You can see there, is that a pill? I think it's just like a strand of the yarn that's sticking out actually. It's pilled a little tiny bit here, but it's barely even visible. I have shaved this jumper before and removed pills from it, but it was quite a long time ago, maybe during the summer. So all the wear this winter has only caused like a couple of tiny pills. It looks pretty much brand new. Anyway, the fact that I included this jumper in my favourite jumpers of all time video really says it all. I think this is a wonderful jumper. I strongly recommend the pattern. Surrey Nordland writes lovely colourwork jumper patterns, and I do wear this one a lot. Oh dear, from that one onto another jumper which I've talked about many times on this channel, so I won't go into so much depth because if you frequently watch my videos you will have seen this one before. This is the Ingrid sweater by Petite Knit. Again, I knitted this right after the pattern released, I think. This is, like the sweater number 18, one of those incredibly popular patterns which I've seen so many people knit up. Mine is knitted in a really random alpaca sock yarn. I believe it's Rico Superba Alpaca Luxury Socks in the beige colour, and it's held with a lace weight merino wool, also beige. I knitted a size up. I'm a size extra small according to my measurements with petite knit patterns, but this is knitted in a size small, and the gauge is a little bit tighter than it should be because I think it's supposed to be knitted up with a DK weight and a silk mohair, and I knitted it up with a sock yarn, admittedly a slightly heavier sock yarn, and a lace weight, so the gauge is a little bit tight, but overall it fits really well since I did knit the size up. It has like comically long sleeves, but that's kind of how I like my jumpers. And I pretty much knitted it exactly to pattern, with the only exceptions being, I think I knitted the sleeves a bit longer than specified. I also knitted the body a little bit shorter than specified, so I think this 2x2 rib section is supposed to be longer, as is the 1x1 rib section from memory. And then obviously the collar. The original pattern had a sort of funnel neck with 2x2 rib, and then 1x1 rib, so it has like 2 types of rib in the collar, which is very cool, but I already have a lot of funnel neck jumpers, so I decided to do more of this like crew neck collar. I just picked up stitches, knitted 2x2 rib, folded the collar down, and then knitted it down with the picked up stitch edge. As I knitted together the live stitches with the edge where I had picked up the stitches originally for the collar, I did do a yarn over in between casting off the stitches here and there, not every stitch, so it was like half a surprisingly stretchy bind off, just to make sure I could fit my head through. I don't think it would have been a problem, but the stretchiness of this edge here, I really do appreciate. It sits really nicely. It does look a little bit messier on the inside as a result, but that doesn't especially bother me. Now, I have touched on the wear on this jumper before. This yarn shows pilling really badly because it pills these sort of white fluffy fibres that don't even really match the colour of the jumper itself, so they're very visible. And I basically have to shave this jumper every couple of wears really to be comfortable wearing it out. I mean, look at that, look how much it's pilled. And this was probably shaved a few weeks ago. Like I do actually clean up this jumper all the time. So yes, a lot of people ask me what yarn I use to knit this, and it is some random sock yarn that I don't hugely recommend. I only used it because it was one of the only things available to me in my local yarn shop, and I needed to get yarn for this in a hurry. The pattern is well written, it's surprisingly easy. There are a lot of short rows in this jumper. There are short rows on the back, on both shoulders at the front, and at the top of both arms. However, the short rows are only in the double moss stitch and in the ribbing, so they're not actually too hard to do. Like, I perhaps think this shouldn't be your first jumper, but if you've knitted a couple of things and you're up for a challenge, I think this is relatively beginner friendly. Compared to the Moby sweater, which is petite knit's similar, more recent cabled jumper release, I think that this is a lot easier and I do recommend it. Like I said, if you're interested in this jumper, I have spoken about it in several of my previous videos. So now let's move on to something else, hopefully, that I haven't spoken about recently. Okay, this is exactly what I wanted. This, not only have I never showed on this channel before, but I think I've posted like one low quality picture of it not even being worn on Instagram, and that was it. And the reason why I did that is because this was gifted to somebody. This was a jumper that I knitted for my boyfriend, and I conveniently managed to collect it and bring it here a couple days ago so that I have it to show in this video. But like, obviously he's been in possession of this for a while. So yes, I defeated the sweater curse and I managed to knit this huge black man-sized jumper. This is the Zipper Sweater Man by Petite Knit, which I know is a very popular pattern for people who want to knit jumpers for boyfriends or brothers or dads or whatever. I think it's really nice for people who might not wear a sort of traditional round neck or high neck jumper because it has that quarter zip style, which I think you see more often in jersey fabric than hand knitting. Overall, I think it's a lovely pattern and I would really like to knit one for myself at some point too. This was knitted in the size medium, and I knitted it with one strand of filcolana Peruvian highland wool and one strand of drops brushed alpaca silk. My thought process was, it's my boyfriend who's getting this jumper, so I can clean it for him, so I'm not super worried about it being superwash, but I did need it to be something soft because he is quite sensitive to wool. He doesn't like my sort of mohair jumpers or whatever, so I did go for that alpaca silk to thicken up with the Peruvian highland wool enough to meet gauge. Filcolana Peruvian highland wool is a yarn that I really love. It's very affordable, which is great because you had to buy a lot of yarn to knit such a large jumper. And it is also very soft. I think the Peruvian highland wool is in a charcoal grey colour and the brushed alpaca silk's in black. So it doesn't really show up very well on camera. These things tend to just show up as a black blob, but it does have a sort of slightly mild look to it because of the dark grey Peruvian highland wool held with the black brushed alpaca silk. I made no modifications to this pattern other than I shortened the collar quite a bit. Like, this is significantly shorter than it's supposed to be according to the pattern. I made that decision just based on pictures I'd seen of people wearing this jumper. I thought that sometimes the collar looked like a bit much, especially because it's double thickness and it's quite chunky. There's just a lot of collar there if you knit it to the length you're supposed to. So this slightly shorter length works out really well and I'm really happy that I did it. Actually, when I knitted this, my boyfriend wasn't even around, so I had to knit this whole thing without him trying it on. And I was terrified that it was not going to fit him, but it actually fits him perfectly, so I'm really happy with how it turned out. I know some people are kind of intimidated by the zip. I found sewing in the zip to be really easy, and I don't have a lot of sewing experience at all. Like, perhaps I didn't do the most perfect job ever, but I think it looks pretty good. It has a knitted facing on the inside as well, which I really like. It just gives a really professional finish. But yes, it took everything I have not to keep this one for myself. I really, really love it. I believe this is something else that I haven't showed on this channel. Or maybe I wore it in one of the videos. I think I might have. Anyway, we're getting into sort of late spring, early summer now. So this is the Anchor Tee by Petite Knit. Petite Knit has two very similar patterns. This one is called the Anchor Tee. The other one is called the Anchor Summer Top, Anchor Blouse. I can never remember. But it's similar but knitted on 4mm needles. This is knitted on 3mm needles. This is a proper fingering weight t-shirt. I don't think it has any short rows or anything. It's just got this classic ribbed yoke. I think there are a lot of Petite Knit Anchor blank, like Anchor sweater, Anchor cardigan. There are a bunch of them and they all have the similar looking ribbed yoke. If you don't like knitting ribbing on very small needles, this probably isn't the pattern for you. I don't mind knitting ribbing, so this was okay. I'll get up a little bit closer so that you can see the yoke because I know you can't really see it from a distance in this yarn. This is knitted in the size small, so again a size up. Although the yarn that I used, it was Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, which is a really lovely yarn, but I find that it stretches and sort of grows quite a lot with wear and with washing. So I should probably have, again, knitted the size extra small because this is very wide and boxy on me. I didn't knit it to the correct length. I think what happened was I had 3 balls of the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk just sitting around, and so I decided to just use them up, and I pretty much did. I had like a couple of meters of yarn left. I'm never very aggressive with yarn chicken, so that's how I like these things. But I pretty much exactly used up 3 balls, which is 750 meters. So yeah, for a top made of 100% silk, not a bad price at all, I don't think. And I really like this t-shirt. I wore it quite a lot. It definitely is a nice change compared to all of the ribbed knitted camisole summer tops that I have. This one offers a bit more coverage, which I sometimes appreciate, and I am planning on knitting up a t-shirt pretty soon. Just as the weather starts to warm up, I have an idea for one that I want to make, and so that will be coming soon. The yarn is lovely. It does have a kind of strange feeling to it. Like, it feels very dry. Like, my hands feel dry when I touch it. Maybe that's not a very clear description. The colour is just cream, I believe. I don't have that much to say about this one. I really enjoyed knitting it. It didn't take as long as I thought, even though it was on 3mm needles. And I wore it a lot, so hopefully I'll make another one soon. Actually, I really like the, what's it called? The Sunday Tee by Petite Knit, which is a similar ribbed yoke, but like long wide ribbing rather than rounds of 1x1 ribbing. And so maybe I'll knit one of those up because I think it looks really nice. It has like a folded collar, I think, as opposed to a ribbed one like this. So yes, that's the Petite Knit Anchor Tee. The next thing that I wanted to show in this video was the ballerina wrap top by 2 of Wands. I knitted one at the end of last year that was in my video last year, and I knitted up another one this year because I wanted to wear it to a college May ball. I knitted it up in black to match my dress. I don't really have a lot of black knitwear because I don't wear a lot of black myself, but I wanted one just to match this one satin dress for this May ball. And so I haven't worn it that much, and I'm not completely sure where it is. I'm hoping it will show up so that I can show it in a future episode because I know you guys really love this pattern. So fingers crossed in one of the later parts of this video it will be there. So I'm moving swiftly on, and I'm sure you've seen one of these before because just about everybody seems to have one. This was my post-exam knit. Like right after my exams finished, I just shut myself in my room for like 6 hours and made this. This is The Frog by Claire Garland or Dot Pebbles Knits or something on Instagram. It's a super popular pattern, which a lot of people have made. I have to get a little bit closer because you're just not going to see him otherwise. He's called Charles. Charles is knitted up in scrap yarn or just bits of yarn I had lying around. I think it's Drops Flora maybe, and Kid Silk for the green. Maybe the white is some other Drops fingering weight and Kid Silk. And then I think the jumper is just knitted in Drops Alpaca. Back when I knitted this, there wasn't a jumper pattern available. I believe now there is one published, but because I knitted this pretty soon after the original frog pattern release, I ended up just making up the tiny jumper pattern on my own. It fits him quite well, I think. I did put wire through his limbs, but the wire is quite stiff, so he's not super posable, and I would probably redo the wire at some point if I ever get around to it. He just sits in our kitchen and watches us cook, and I think he's very well liked in my household. Okay, so I have one more piece, and this sort of marks the start of this YouTube channel. I think everything after this was shown on the YouTube channel. In fact, I think this was too, because I knitted it at the start of the summer. These are the Hemingway shorts. They're by the Knitting Booth on Instagram, I think. I knitted these up as a test knit at the start of the summer, and they're knitted in 2 strands of Coast by Holst garn. I am so happy with this yarn. I think it is just wonderful. The yardage you get on a ball is massive. I want to say it's like 400 meters. It can't be. Okay, scratch what I said before. I should have read up on this before I started the video. It's 2-ply, 55% merino and 45% cotton, and there are 350 meters per 50 grams. So it's definitely a light fingering weight, and you can knit it up on its own, but the 2 strands held together made a perfect DK weight. And this pair of shorts took me, I think, less than 3 skeins of the Holst Garn Coast, which is just such a good deal. I haven't knitted anything with it since, and I really think that I should. The colour is warm brown, if I remember correctly, but it's not too warm. Okay, it's a bit warm. I'd rather it was cooler. I like cool browns, but this was the nicest brown they had available. I'm sorry, there's a lot of hair on all of my knitting, which I know is a little bit unpleasant, but I just shed hair everywhere. And it really shows up on dark coloured garments, which is probably part of the reason why I don't have very many. So these shorts are called the Hemingway shorts because they have 5 hems. There is a folded hem on the top, which the elastic sits inside, folded hems on both of the pockets. The pockets are really cool. Like, I really like how this pattern explains how to make pockets. The only downside is there's quite a bit of seaming around the sides of the pockets, and I don't seam things very neatly, so they don't look too great. And then they also have a folded hem on the bottom of the leg. These fit me pretty well. These are a size C, by the way. I don't think I mentioned my sizes for everything else, but if you check my Ravelry, I think pretty much everything in this video is shown on Ravelry, and it will probably have the size on the Ravelry page for my project, in case you're interested in anything like size, exact yarn colours, the amount of yarn I used, anything like that. Check my Ravelry for all of the details. So yes, these were the size C, I think, and they fit me pretty well. The only thing is the top of the legs are quite tight, and I think it's because of the cast off edge. When I made the folded hem, I ended up like knitting together the live stitches with some stitches a little way up from the bottom of the leg to create that folded hem, and then casting off as I went, similarly to how I did for the neck of the Ingrid sweater. But like I said, with that one I'd done yarn overs in between some of the cast off stitches, and here I didn't. So these are a lot less stretchy. They don't cut into my leg or anything, but the legs are definitely tighter fitting than I think they're supposed to be. And also, I think it doesn't help with stopping the bottom of the legs from flipping up slightly. Anyway, I wore them quite a lot. I wore these when Britain had like the 40-degree few days in the summer, and they were honestly pretty comfortable. I've worn them canoeing, they worked well for that. They're just a good pair of shorts I've had quite a lot of use out of, and it's a nice and really well-written pattern. I believe it's her only pattern, so to have such a thorough, well-written pattern be her first release, quite impressive. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because I have to stop somewhere. That puts me on like 4 episodes to get through all this kind of pace right now, although maybe I'll fit some more into the future episodes because this was mostly like full jumpers or big garments, whereas for the rest of the year I was doing more in the way of socks and accessories. So yeah, I think this will probably be a 3 or 4 parter in total. So I guess I will shut up now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will be back again soon with another episode of this probably. So I'll see you then. Goodbye.